The story begins in a quiet, sunlit room, where the young woman sits alone, flipping through an old photo album she had found tucked away on a dusty shelf. The pages are yellowed with age, edges curled from years of handling. Each photograph is a frozen moment of laughter, warmth, and memories that seem almost unreal in their clarity. One photograph catches her eye, a snapshot of her mother, radiant and carefree, arm in arm with a man whose presence seems to command the frame. His smile is confident, mischievous even, the kind that makes time feel suspended, as if the photograph itself had bottled a spark of life. There's something in his gaze that feels familiar, almost like a whisper of a secret she can't quite place. The young woman leans closer, tracing the outline of the man's face with her finger, trying to remember if she had ever heard stories about him. Her mother had always been lighthearted when she spoke of the past, often glossing over certain names with a smile or a nostalgic sigh. Yet, seeing this man now, frozen in time, there's a sudden sense of curiosity and an inexplicable tug at her heart. The room around her is quiet except for the faint hum of the afternoon sunlight streaming through the curtains. Dust motes dance lazily in the golden light, making the moment feel almost sacred, as if the universe itself had slowed to allow her to absorb this memory. The photograph, though static, seems to hold energy. It radiates the charm and intensity of a man who clearly left a mark on her mother's life, a life before she existed, before her own story began. Her thoughts drift, imagining the laughter, the whispered secrets, and the small moments of joy that these two had shared. She wonders what it must have been like for her mother back then, so young, vibrant, and seemingly unburdened by the world. The image evokes both a sense of longing and curiosity, a desire to understand more about the past and the people who shaped it. For a fleeting moment, she feels connected not just to her mother, but to a part of life that feels tantalizingly close yet irretrievably distant. As she carefully closes the album, the photograph still clutched in her hands, a ripple of anticipation courses through her. She realizes that this isn't just a memory. It's a story waiting to unfold, a thread that might weave her life in unexpected ways. The familiarity she sensed in the man's eyes leaves her with questions that linger, hinting at a journey that could blur the lines between past and present, memory and reality. In this quiet, sun-drenched room, the young woman doesn't yet know that the man she now gazes at through a frozen moment in time will soon step into her present. What begins as nostalgia will soon evolve into something far more complex, stirring emotions that she never expected to feel, and setting the stage for a story of unexpected attraction, complicated histories, and undeniable tension. The scene shifts from the quiet comfort of her room to the bustling energy of a modern-day cafe. It's mid-afternoon, and the air is filled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the soft hum of conversations, and the occasional clatter of cups and saucers. The young woman walks in, her mind still tangled with the images from her mother's photo album. She orders a latte, glancing around for a quiet corner where she can collect her thoughts. And then she sees him. Sitting at a small table near the window is a man who seems to radiate an effortless charm. He's older, undeniably confident, and carries an air of calm authority that immediately draws the eye. His hair is peppered with gray, lending him a distinguished look, and there's a subtle warmth in his smile that seems both inviting and mysterious. For a moment, time feels as if it has slowed. The chatter of the cafe becomes a background hum, and all she can focus on is him. There's an uncanny familiarity in his presence, though she can't place it at first. Her heart beats faster, a flutter of curiosity and intrigue coursing through her. Something about him feels known, and then it hits her like a whisper of a memory from long ago. He's the man in the photograph she had just been staring at, frozen in time alongside her mother. The realization is electrifying, a spark that ignites a mix of fascination, disbelief, and something she isn't quite ready to name. She hesitates at the edge of the room, unsure whether to approach or retreat, yet unable to look away. Their eyes meet briefly, And in that fleeting connection, she senses an unspoken recognition. There's a subtle acknowledgement, a shared curiosity, as if the universe itself had orchestrated this moment. Her mind races with questions. How's he ended up here now in her life? Why does it feel like fate is leaning in, drawing her closer to a story she never imagined living? The man adjusts his posture, leaning slightly back in his chair, his expression calm yet attentive, as if he's aware that something significant is unfolding. The sunlight streams through the window, casting soft golden highlights across his features, accentuating the lines of experience and the warmth of his gaze. It's the kind of moment that feels suspended in time, delicate and charged with possibility, where a single glance can carry the weight of decades of untold stories. The young woman takes a cautious step forward, coffee cup in hand, her pulse quickening. Each detail, the way he sips his drink, the subtle gestures of his hands, the thoughtful crease of his brow, draws her in further. This is no ordinary encounter. It is a collision of past and present, a moment where memories and reality intertwine. In that cafe, amidst the casual rhythm of everyday life, an invisible thread seems to pull them toward one another. What starts as curiosity will soon evolve into something far more intricate, an attraction laced with tension, history, and undeniable chemistry. This chance encounter marks the beginning of a story that will challenge boundaries, awaken emotions, and unravel the delicate balance between past and present. The young woman froze in place, her hand still hovering over the handle of the cafe door. Her eyes locked on the man as he turned slightly, catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. There was again that spark of familiarity she couldn't shake. Every detail, the tilt of his head, the subtle curl of his lips when he smiled, the confident way he carried himself, resonated with something deep in her memory. And then it hit her like a sudden jolt of electricity. This was the same man from her mother's photograph. Her mind raced, each thought colliding with the next. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. She could feel her pulse in her ears as a rush of conflicting emotions washed over her. Curiosity, shock, and inexplicable attraction she wasn't prepared to face. She blinked, trying to convince herself it was impossible, yet every instinct told her otherwise. He looked up from his cup of coffee, catching her gaze. For a moment, there was no movement, no sound, just the two of them locked in a silent, electric acknowledgement. His eyes, sharp yet warm, seemed to carry a flicker of recognition too, though he didn't speak. That fleeting connection made her heart flutter with a mix of excitement and guilt. This was her mother's past, a chapter that should have remained untouchable, yet here it was, intersecting with her present. The cafe suddenly felt smaller, the chatter of other patrons fading into a distant murmur. She wanted to retreat, to disappear into the crowd and collect her scattered thoughts, but she couldn't. Something about him demanded attention, demanded acknowledgement. The awkwardness in the air was thick, almost tangible, like a fog that both concealed and revealed at the same time. Every second stretched painfully, magnifying her awareness of the closeness between them, even though a social chasm of years and history lay in the space between. She forced herself to take a step back, breathing deeply, trying to steady the whirlwind inside her. The memories of her mother's stories, the laughter, the romance, the fleeting glances she once heard whispered over dinner, now seemed intertwined with a new, more complicated set of emotions. She realized with a jolt that this encounter wasn't just a coincidence. It was a pivot point, a moment that had the potential to change the course of her own story, whether she was ready for it or not. In the midst of her hesitation, she caught his subtle gestures, the way he adjusted his jacket, the quiet confidence in his posture, the faint, knowing smile that suggested he understood the tension as well as she did. That small smile carried weight, history, and possibility all at once. And suddenly, the awkwardness wasn't just discomfort. It was an undeniable signal, a silent invitation to a complicated dance that neither of them had anticipated. Her thoughts tumbled in a storm of anticipation and caution. How could this be real? How could someone so intimately connected to her mother now stand before her? So close, yet so socially and emotionally charged. Every instinct warned her to step away, yet every fiber of curiosity urged her to lean in. The awkward realization had shifted something fundamental. It had blurred the line between past and present, transforming an ordinary moment in a cafe into a turning point that would shape everything to come. And in that suspended moment, with the sunlight glinting off the window and the distant hum of life continuing around them, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. Nothing would ever be the same again. The young woman felt a nervous flutter in her chest as she followed her mother into the cozy, warmly lit living room. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old books, a comforting mixture that contrasted sharply with the anxiety bubbling inside her. Her mother's excitement was palpable, her smile wide and eyes sparkling with anticipation. Today was the day she would introduce her daughter to someone she once loved, a man who had left a lasting imprint on her own past. The thought made the young woman's stomach twist in equal parts curiosity and apprehension. And then he appeared. The older man stepped into the room with a confident ease that seemed to fill the space without effort. His presence was magnetic, commanding attention without demanding it. There was a softness in his gaze as he looked at the young woman, a mix of surprise, recognition, and something she couldn't quite decipher, perhaps curiosity or admiration. He extended a hand in greeting, and she found herself shaking it, acutely aware of the warmth of his grip and the way his eyes held hers just a fraction longer than expected. Her mother, sensing the tension, clapped her hands together lightly and laughed, attempting to ease the charged atmosphere. "I thought it was time you two finally met," she said cheerfully, her voice tinged with nostalgia. The young woman nodded, forcing a smile, yet inside she was caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. How much did he remember of her mother's youth? How much of their past lingered in the air like an invisible thread connecting them? As the conversation began, the young woman noticed subtle gestures that revealed glimpses of his past connection with her mother, a shared look of fond memory, a gentle laugh at an old anecdote, and the quiet way he seemed to respect her presence in the room. She realized that meeting him was more than just a casual introduction. It was an immersion into a story that had shaped her mother's life, and now, somehow, it was beginning to shape hers. There were moments of awkwardness, too, small pauses where the weight of the past pressed silently against the present. She caught herself observing him closely, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, the hint of gray in his hair that somehow made him more distinguished, the ease with which he commanded attention without effort. Each detail heightened the tension within her, a mixture of admiration, intrigue, and something far more dangerous, an attraction she knew she shouldn't feel but couldn't deny. Her mother's laughter echoed through the room as she reminisced about days gone by, stories of youthful escapades and flirtations that now seemed charming in retrospect. The young woman listened, her mind tracing the contours of history, imagining the intensity of the connection her mother once had with this man. And yet, there was something undeniable about the way he looked at her now, a quiet, subtle curiosity, an awareness that the story wasn't finished, that the threads of the past were weaving themselves into a new narrative. By the time the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the room, the young woman understood something important. Introductions were never just about names or pleasantries. They were about recognizing history, acknowledging the present, and sensing the invisible tension that hinted at stories yet to unfold. In that living room, surrounded by laughter, memory, and a flicker of undeniable chemistry, the stage was set. This was more than a meeting. It was the beginning of a complicated dance between past and present, desire and decorum, familiarity and forbidden intrigue. The city had quieted down, leaving a serene stillness that wrapped around the older man as he stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint hum of distant traffic and the occasional flicker of neon from a nearby street lamp. He leaned on the railing, staring out over the city lights that glittered like scattered diamonds in the darkness, lost in thought. The encounter earlier that day, meeting the young woman, seeing the reflection of the past collide with the present, had left him unsettled in ways he hadn't expected. He thought about her, the way she looked at him with a mix of curiosity, hesitation, and something more profound, something dangerous. She was vibrant, intelligent, and alive with a youthful energy that both challenged and intrigued him. Yet, she was also the daughter of someone he had once. A soft chime from his phone broke his reverie. It was a message from her, a simple, "Are you still awake?" His pulse quickened, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to respond. Every instinct told him that replying would set a series of events in motion that could not be undone. Yet he felt an irresistible pull. Finally, he typed a simple "yes" and hit send, the word carrying more weight than it seemed. The minutes that followed were torturous, filled with anticipation and unspoken questions. When she arrived at his balcony, wrapped in a light jacket against the night chill, the distance between them felt smaller than it should have. Her eyes searched his, reflecting the same mixture of wonder, curiosity, and unacknowledged attraction. For a moment, words were unnecessary. They both understood the gravity of the moment, the complicated emotional landscape they were treading. He spoke first, his voice low and measured, confessing feelings he hadn't admitted even to himself until now. He didn't speak of the past. They both knew it, but of the undeniable connection, the magnetic pull that neither of them could ignore. She listened, her heart pounding, caught between shock and exhilaration, aware that this was no ordinary conversation. This was the unearthing of a tension that had been building for decades, now finding form in the quiet intimacy of the night. As the city lights shimmered around them, a fragile understanding formed. The confession was not a promise, nor a surrender. It was an acknowledgement of reality, a moment of truth that left them both raw and exposed. In that late-night stillness, the boundary between past and present blurred, and they both realized that nothing would ever be simple again. The night held its breath, waiting for the next step in a story that had only just begun. The next day, sunlight poured through the tall windows of a quaint little cafe, casting a warm glow over the wooden tables and scattered potted plants. The young woman and the older man sat across from each other, a cup of coffee in front of each, yet neither touching it immediately. The tension from their previous encounters had softened slightly, replaced by curiosity and a hesitant comfort. Today, the air between them felt lighter, tinged with an unspoken invitation to explore this strange, magnetic connection. He made a subtle joke about the barista's overly dramatic latte art, and she couldn't help but laugh, a clear, uninhibited sound that seemed to echo through the small space. The sound was intoxicating to him, a reminder of the vitality and spontaneity she carried in her every gesture. She laughed again, this time at something he said about his own awkward attempts at baking, and the laughter became shared, contagious, filling the space with warmth and life. It was a moment where the world outside the cafe seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them and the connection that pulsed quietly between them. There was a rhythm to their conversation, a natural ebb and flow that made even the smallest interactions significant. He leaned back, chuckling at her animated expressions, while she mirrored his gestures in a subtle, playful way. Each smile, each glance, seemed to carry layers of unspoken meaning, curiosity, admiration, and yes, a dangerous spark of attraction neither of them could fully deny. The familiarity that once felt like a memory now felt present, alive in the laughter and the shared ease of their interaction. She noticed the small details, the way he tilted his head when he laughed, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, the gentleness of his gestures despite the undeniable strength in his presence. It made her pulse quicken in a way that was thrilling and frightening at the same time. She was acutely aware that this laughter, this simple joy, was blurring boundaries she had thought were clear. Yet, she couldn't help herself. There was a magnetic pull drawing her closer to him, as natural and irresistible as breathing. For his part, he was equally affected. The laughter reminded him that attraction wasn't always about physical proximity or grand gestures. It could be found in moments like this, in the effortless exchange of humor and understanding. He realized he was beginning to see her not just as a young woman, but as someone whose energy and intelligence stirred something in him he hadn't expected to feel again. It was exhilarating and disorienting, a dangerous combination that made the day both exhilarating and fraught with complexity. As they lingered in the cafe, savoring the moment, the laughter gradually softened into quiet smiles and meaningful silences. There was a shared acknowledgement of the tension that remained, the invisible line between curiosity and something deeper. Yet, for now, they allowed themselves to revel in the simplicity of shared joy. It was fleeting, ephemeral, yet charged with the promise of something more, a connection that could grow into something complicated, intense, and entirely unexpected. In that sunlit cafe, amidst the clinking of cups and murmurs of other patrons, they discovered an undeniable truth. Sometimes, the simplest moments, shared laughter, a knowing glance, a subtle smile, can be the most powerful form of intimacy, capable of drawing two people into a story they never anticipated living. The air between them had changed. What had started as curiosity and light-hearted laughter now carried an unspoken weight, a tension that neither the young woman nor the older man could ignore. They found themselves alone in a quiet corner of the cafe, the warm sunlight fading into soft shadows that seemed to cocoon them in a private world. Every glance, every subtle movement carried meaning, charged, electrified, and undeniably intimate. It was in the way their eyes lingered a fraction too long, searching, questioning, measuring boundaries. She caught him watching her with a quiet intensity, and a shiver ran down her spine. She quickly looked away, pretending to sip her coffee, but the warmth of his gaze burned through the thin veneer of casual conversation. There was a forbidden quality to the tension, a dangerous allure, because he was someone tied to her mother's past, someone whose presence should have been untouchable. Yet, here they were, connected by something far more complex than social boundaries or family history. Her mind raced with questions and warnings, yet her body betrayed her. She leaned slightly forward, drawn to him despite the gnawing voice in her head telling her to step back. Each word they exchanged was layered with double meanings, subtle flirtations hidden behind polite conversation. She laughed at something trivial he said, but it carried a tremor, a heartbeat of vulnerability that neither could hide. He noticed, and the corners of his mouth curved into a faint, knowing smile, as if he understood the storm of emotion swirling within her. The world around them seemed to blur. Other patrons became indistinct shapes. The sounds of the cafe faded to a soft murmur, leaving only the two of them in sharp focus. Every gesture felt magnified. The way he brushed a strand of hair from his face, the slight tilt of her head when she met his gaze, the subtle shift of his body as he leaned closer just enough to feel her presence without crossing an invisible line. The tension was intoxicating, a magnetic force that pulled them closer while warning them of the consequences. Her thoughts kept circling back to the boundaries they were approaching. He was her mother's old flame, a man whose history was deeply intertwined with her family. To feel attraction, to notice the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, it felt dangerous, thrilling, and entirely forbidden. Yet, the moment they shared was alive with possibilities. It was a collision of past and present, a delicate balancing act between desire and restraint, and every small interaction made the rules feel more fragile. The subtle tension between them spoke louder than words. A shared smile, a hesitant touch on a hand, a quiet laugh that lingered longer than it should, each became a silent acknowledgement of the emotions neither could name. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also undeniably real, a spark that refused to be ignored. By the time they parted that day, the air was thick with unspoken feelings. The forbidden tension remained, palpable, lingering like a charged storm waiting to break. Both knew that the line they were walking was perilously thin, yet neither could resist the pull of the connection that had already begun to weave itself into the fabric of their lives. In that quiet, sunlit cafe corner, the first rules of attraction were quietly rewritten. Lines blurred, hearts stirred, and a dangerous, compelling story was unfolding.